This is your reality check.
Welcome to The Reality Check, the weekly Canadian show that explores a wide range of controversies and curiosities using science and critical thinking. Today is September 5th, 2021, and I'm producer Pat. We have two interesting segments for you today. Darren looks into headlines about a certain beer company running advertisements in your dreams. But first, Adam does some sleuthing around vaccine passports and QR codes. I hope everyone out there is staying safe and healthy, and we will talk to you soon.
What's up, cuboids? I live in Quebec, and today, on September 1st, as I record this segment, the province is starting a vaccine passport system. Now, these are starting to become more and more common, as Ontario has also announced a similar plan in effect starting September 22nd. So there are many issues to consider when it comes to vaccine passports, ranging from the medical value, privacy and freedom concerns of them being required. I'm not going to get into things like that. Earlier this month, I stumbled upon what seemed to be a somewhat unjustified claim about QR code technology, claiming that these were very dangerous, could compromise everything from health records, criminal records, financial history, and more if they were hacked into something China-da. That's a portmanteau of China and Canada. So this was just a one-off person I saw mentioning it, but it seemed like there might be some value in talking about QR codes since this is a key technology used in some applications which are being used for vaccine passports. You've probably seen or maybe even used a QR code before. QR code is a short name for quick response code. So it's a type of matrix barcode, which is sort of two-dimensional barcode. You'll see them as a square image with little squares in the corners, and it's sort of filled with black and white pixels throughout. It looks like old TV static or digital camo, maybe. They were invented in the 1990s in Japan, and they're a convenient way of storing data which can be read by something like a smartphone's camera. Common use of QR codes is to encode a simple URL, so that's the address of a web page. There are QR code readers available for phones, but some phones have this natively built in. So an iPhone doesn't have a QR reader app pre-installed, but the camera app will automatically detect a QR code if you just point it at one. And if you sort of confirm a little pop-up, it'll open a web browser to the page if it's a URL that it's encoded with. QR codes have grown in popularity during the pandemic as they offer paperless, contactless ways to pass on information. A restaurant, for example, can have a QR code menu. So I recently went to a restaurant. They offered me a paper menu or to scan with my phone. The menu doesn't need to be encoded in the QR code itself, but instead the QR code contains a link to a web page which your phone will visit with a copy of the menu, assuming you have an internet connection. Pretty simple. Now, it's not really that complicated. It's just a slightly more convenient way of accessing a page rather than typing out a page's address into your web browser, potentially making spelling mistakes or typos. It's sort of foolproof. Now, more data than just a simple URL can be included in a QR code, but this is usually not necessary. So I could put a bunch of text or image data into the code itself, but alternatively, I can just put a URL shortcut to a web page containing a much larger amount of text or a larger amount of image data, and this doesn't need to be that optimized to be put into some sort of large code. The upper limit on the amount of data that a QR code can generally hold is about 3 kilobytes. That's 2,953 bytes to be precise. So that's the equivalent of 7,089 numbers or 4,289 alphanumeric characters. So more than enough for a very long web address, which can itself have data much larger than 3 kilobytes. So if you're talking about an image or something like that, you wouldn't be able to get much with 3 kilobytes. So what's going on with these QR codes as it relates to vaccines? I can't speak to the experience of every vaccine passport system out there. Ontario's app is only coming in October, and it's still being developed, so we will see what they have specifically. I've installed the one in Quebec and played around with it with my own data. I didn't have access to anyone else's data. My children are too young to have been vaccinated, so they didn't have anything to put in there. So at first, the passport app and system wasn't available, but I had a QR code, which was a proof of vaccination paper. This was something that was available prior to this, the release of these applications. Now, I didn't know exactly what was in the code, but the piece of paper that I had the code on had my name, date of birth, and details about the time, place, and type of vaccines that I had received. Now, these details include some data which doesn't mean much to me, like the lot and dose number for the vaccine. It seems like the information on the code is the same information that's on that piece of paper. It's extremely unlikely that a vaccine passport QR code would contain tax information, criminal record history, or other data completely unrelated to the vaccine. The Quebec one certainly does not, but I can only presume that others would likely not have it as well. So this is your basic idea of proportionality in security. So you allow people to have access to the data which they need for a certain purpose, but you don't give them more. Otherwise, you're basically not really following that concept of proportionality. Maybe you're giving more data than is needed, and that's bad security. So I was curious to see if I could discern what was in this QR code, so I tried to scan it just sort of with my iPhone, a normal QR code reading app. So it said QR code detected. It did recognize it, but then it said there was no usable data found. So great. I couldn't tell how well that data was protected, but it does attempt to be obscured in some way. So I tried an actual QR code reading app to see exactly what that data said. Basically said SHC : / and then a huge string of numbers, presumably my data encrypted in some way. So fast forward a bit, the app called vaccicode was available, so I downloaded it and I played around with it. I scanned my proof of COVID-19 vaccination. The app then asked for the patient's year of birth, so I entered that because I know my year of birth. And then the proof was in my phone, and I could display that proof as a QR code to show someone else if I'm trying to get into a restaurant, a movie, something like that. So I open up the app, chose my name, I click on my name. The QR code is displayed with no details visible besides my name. That's what you would show someone in a venue. And then basically that person would scan your code using the vaccicode Verif app, right? So you have your sort of end user app. There's also an app that the business is going to use. So I was curious to see how this process would go down. So I downloaded the vaccicode Verif app, sort of pretending that I was a business. It is intended to be used by the business to scan the user's proof of vaccination, but there's no restriction on downloading the app. I had no problem getting it, and this makes sense. How would you be able to restrict downloading the app while still making it available, sort of easily available to the many, many employees who would need to install this on their smartphones, right? So it's not just the person who owns this business is going to have it. It's anyone who could potentially be at the door unless you want to be buying a bunch of phones. You don't want to be making it hard for someone to install this. So there are a lot of potential ways that you could lock this down, but the app is secure enough that shouldn't really be an issue. So I wanted to see what the store owner would see. So I did a few tests of scanning both my original proof of vaccination QR code and the one displayed in my vaccicode app. The codes are different. Like if you actually look at the picture, the pixels are different, but they seem to include the same information. So I'm not sure if it's just the same data that's still encoded in a different way. Now, a message comes up that says certifié par le gouvernement du Québec, Adam Gardner. So that's French for certified by the Quebec government, Adam Gardner. It's green, has a little check mark. So, very easy to see. If you're just scanning a long line of people, you'll be able to say, green, green, go, go, go. You're all good. Go and breathe on each other or whatever you want to do. Now, the message appears only briefly as designed. Only the name is visible to the retailer, the person who's doing the scanning. There's no record. It doesn't keep it. However, I was able to take a screenshot of this message without a problem. So, if a business owner is scanning your QR code, they could take a screenshot if they wanted to say, keep track of the name of everybody who comes into their business or something like that. So no other details which are included in your code are shown to the person who's scanning it. No date of birth, no details about the vaccine, when it was received, your dose number and things like that. Seems like a good, secure system, right? Well, security experts looked at the app as well. The app does not seem to communicate out to a remote server when the code is verified. So it seems like the government is not using this particular method to track your whereabouts, right? It's not like every time this app is used, the government of Quebec is going to be able to track exactly where you are. And this wasn't really that hard to test. I did it myself. I put my phone in airplane mode. The app still worked. It was still able to scan. So that's good. One security expert, François Proux, was able to decode the information in the QR code, and he was able to gain access to immunization information, such as the person's name, date of birth, vaccine received, and location at which it was given. This seems to be the same information that I had on my paper proof of COVID-19 vaccination page that I got from the Quebec government's website. So while not everyone may be able to do so, a person could get a bit more information if they had access to your QR code. But not your banking information, not your criminal record information, nothing like that. But does one need to be a skilled computer hacker to get this information? I don't think so. I was able to get the same information from a QR code with very little effort. And apologies to the Quebec government if I'm giving away some big secret here. So 4 security experts told La Presse that it was theoretically possible for a malicious user to use software not approved by the government of Quebec to read confidential information. Well, what about the government of Quebec's own approved software? The vaccicode Verif app doesn't display much information, but the vaccicode app itself, the one that's intended for members of the public to display their own information, can easily be used to get a little more information from a person's QR code. This is, after all, what users are using to put their own info into the app. So when I open the app on my phone, I can click the Show Details button to get my own details. So my full date of birth, specifics about the 2 doses I received, where I got them, things like that. In my case, this says I got the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine. It shows the community center where I got it with the dates at which they were administered and has lot information about those vaccines. But that's my own information, so no big deal, right? I'm seeing it on my own phone, so it doesn't really matter. But there's nothing stopping someone from scanning another person's QR code with this app under the pretense of simply adding another person's data. You're prompted for the year of birth of the person whose QR code you're scanning, but you don't get locked out when you input the wrong year of birth, so you can just keep trying again and again. If you get access to my QR code and have a look at my face, you could probably guess my year of birth within 10 years, 20 years max. I don't pass for under 30. No one would probably mistake me for someone who's over 50. So you'll be able to crack in a few minutes of trial and error tops. You would need a photo of the QR code to be able to try again and again, but this wouldn't be that hard for someone to do under the pretense of scanning your code. Instead of using the app, you just take a picture. Though they could fix this kind of loophole with an update to the current app, the current version works on existing codes even when it's in airplane mode. So by design, it doesn't go out to any internet server, so it doesn't check to see if it's the most recent version of the application. So someone could keep using that and they would never have to update it on their phone. So we have to ask ourselves, is this information all that useful? I'd suspect not really. So could someone steal your identity by knowing the details of your vaccine? It's hard to imagine how. So someone could have your exact date of birth, and that's, potentially useful information, but lots of types of IDs have your date of birth on them. So I struggle to think of a reason for which someone would want to get this specific information about someone's vaccines. So I don't necessarily see a big concern with it being compromised. The system used here is the Smart Health Card system, which is being used by many other governments. The Smart Health Card website says that a card should contain a person's name and date of birth, their clinical information, such as test date, manufacturer, and results. So vaccination type, date, and location. This fits with the type of information on the Quebec proof of vaccination QR code. They also state that they should not contain information such as a phone number, an address, a government-issued identifier, and any other health information. So by design, though the information in that QR code can potentially be compromised, this is a limited amount of data proportional to what is necessary to be used. So that seems like a good system to me. And we need to compare the information that you could get to this to alternatives. So I once had a photocopy made of my driver's license at we'll call it a bar in Vancouver, and more information than is on my QR code would be available to that place of business if they kept that. So anytime you're asked for ID to enter a place, you're likely giving them more information than is on your QR code. But people are generally wary of things which involve computers and smartphones. But in this case, that data is not going to be centralized somewhere, so there's less of a concern. Similarly, if someone got a photo of something like your credit card, this would allow them to make fraudulent purchases, while your vaccine information would not be as valuable to someone and it's less of a risk to you. Now, I'm not saying don't worry about it, but rather be aware of what's in the code and then use that information to decide who to show it to. So don't put your QR code on your Instagram page or something like that. Now in Ontario, we don't know what the system will be yet. And depending on what province or what state or what country you live in, you may not know what's going to happen there. It's been suggested that for Ontario, something like a medical exemption could also be included in a QR code. So if a reason is encoded in a code, that could be a privacy concern for someone that doesn't want people to know that information. If the enhanced COVID-19 vaccine certificate, as they are calling it, has more information, that could be a concern, but we don't really know what that's going to be. If such a code had, say, health card information, so your name and your actual OHIP number, this could allow someone to use it to illegally access some of that free Canadian healthcare that you might have heard about. So it's in the government of Ontario's best interest not to include that information, even if you as a person don't want that getting out either. QR codes, these aren't rocket science. They contain data which can be encrypted, but as we've seen with the example we looked at today, that data may be able to be decrypted by someone who isn't explicitly authorized to do so. The QR code system used by the Quebec government could potentially allow someone to access a small amount of information about your vaccination history, but this data does not appear to be all that useful to a malicious user. Though the specific implementation for other areas may vary, when you're sharing your QR code with someone, they could potentially be getting full access to the data that the code contains. So be careful about who you share it with. Don't hand over your phone or QR code to someone, and watch that they're scanning it using the appropriate application and not, for example, taking a photo of your QR code for later use or taking a screenshot of the information displayed as they scan your code. And yes, of course, you should get vaccinated if you're somehow listening to this show but haven't done so already. So do it for your own health, and if not, do it for the health of others, and if not, do it so that you can get into a restaurant or a movie if that's really the only motivation you'll have to actually get a vaccine. Peace out, cuboids.
I was recently having a discussion, and someone mentioned that Coors Light was able to run ads in your dreams. I was pretty skeptical and thought it would probably make a decent segment, and Adam had already sent a link, so I thought this is a good start. I have to do less work.
Yeah, I was at home, saw an article about it while I was drinking a refreshing Coors Light for some reason, and it struck me as interesting.
While sleeping. For those less familiar, Coors Light is a brand of beer, and given that the main point of what this whole thing is about is to advertise their product, I realized that even by exploring this topic, regardless of the validity, it serves their brand's purpose. Mm-hmm. As such, I wanted to use general terms instead of the company name, but found it difficult when describing this, as the first search result from newswire.ca in January 2021 had the headline, quote, "Coors Light is creating the first big game ad that runs in your dreams," end quote.
Is it really a big game ad? Is my dream the big game?
Is it? Looking right below that headline, it says, "News provided by Molson Coors Beverage Company." And right under that, sort of as a header to the entire article, it says, quote, "Coors is using the science of targeted dream incubation to give you the most refreshing big game ad experience ever."
Wow.
Clearly an objective news source. From the little I looked, it seems that Newswire is a press release aggregator to help journalists, with completely biased information. Anyway, is there anything more trustworthy? Well, Forbes posted an article, same day in January, 1 hour earlier, with the headline, quote, "Coors didn't buy a Super Bowl ad. It wants into your dreams instead," end quote. Well, that's slightly better. Okay. Starting with a large image at the top of the article that is an ad from the company. Pegoraro is the author, in Forbes, wrote, quote, "The beer conglomerate announced Wednesday morning in a YouTube video that will post a brief movie and an 8-hour soundscape to a Big Game Dream site February 3rd for people to soak in the night before the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Kansas City Chiefs face off in Super Bowl 55 on Sunday, February 7th. The idea is that watching the 91-second clip a few times and then falling asleep to that soundtrack will inspire dreams of the mountain views Coors evokes in its regular ads, and perhaps this audiovisual banquet will inspire thoughts of the company's beers too."
Oh boy.
Audio-visual banquet. Are you sure? Who's paying this guy? Yeah. He then describes the researcher Coors paired with, using language very similar to the press release. I don't want to fault him that much. This is how it works in the world. Yes. So I'll just quote the press release.
Let's just cut out the middleman.
Well, right. Well, I feel it's less plagiarism when the press release is created for this purpose. Quote, "With the help of Dr. Deidre Barrett, a leading psychologist, author, and expert on dreams, Coors created a film with specific audio and visual stimuli to induce the most refreshing dream you'll ever have." Yeah. Actually, you'll have all year. "Using targeted dream incubation, the science of guiding dreams, Coors will shape and compel your subconscious using a stimulus film and an 8-hour soundscape throughout the night to trigger you to dream the Coors Big Game ad." And this is still the press release. I've studied dreams and methods to influence them throughout my career, but working with the creators of the Coors Dream Project was a novel opportunity to craft audio and visual stimuli that viewers could use to trigger specific dream content, Dr. Barrett says. We saw the results come to life in the Dream Lab trial run when participants reported similar dream experiences, including refreshing streams, mountains, waterfalls, and even Coors itself. The Forbes piece basically describes what's in the promotional video, but no analysis of methodology or the validity of the research, aside from a couple mentions of other studies that say influencing dreams might be possible. Disappointing, but that's how these things go. I mean, there is a bit of a, if you look and think about mountains for a good 10 minutes before you go to sleep, yeah, you might then dream about mountains. Might. But you're probably more likely to dream about mountains if you just did that than if you didn't. Right? And then a new fighter has entered the ring. Shoshana Wodinsky at Gizmodo. This article came out in June with the title, No, Brands Can't Target Ads at Your Dreams. Now, this is the title I like to see.
Yes.
Potential confirmation bias, but a clear statement instead of clickbait. And then the subtitle, An open letter begged authorities to investigate this looming threat that doesn't and probably won't ever exist.
Won't ever strong, but doesn't is
probably won't ever.
Yeah.
Kudos, Gizmodo. While we should have reasons for our beliefs, it is refreshing to get the main point of an article in 2 sentences. Let's see if those assertions of this never existing hold up, though. The summary of events is presented, the ad campaign and such, and then recently there was an open letter signed by a group of sleep researchers to the Federal Trade Commission to ensure that corporations don't target our dreams.
Wouldn't the sleep researchers be the first ones to know that it's kind of nonsense?
One would hope. Methodologically, the general setup was people are in a sleep lab, monitored by the Coors team. I feel like there's so many Duff beer jokes one could make here, right? Yes. Watching and listening to special videos before and during sleep, nature scenes.
During sleep.
Yes. The Gizmodo piece said that there might be some support for this idea, as an MIT team put out a wearable to help people with PTSD that focused on targeted dream incubation. Hard not to say the word inception, but all that to say is that there are people working on this legitimately, which might be having some effect somewhere, but we're not quite there yet. Quoting Wodinsky, and to Coors' credit, the company did enlist Dr. Deidre Barrett, a Harvard professor, internationally renowned dream expert and frequent writer on the topic. About a month after the Original Scientists Coalition released its open letter raising alarm bells over the impending ad-targeted doom that Coors was foisting on us all, Barrett put out a post of her own. In it, she broke down some of the choices Coors made when splicing the final ad together and when wording the press release to make the trials sound, well, like a harbinger of ad-targeted doom. But behind the scenes, nearly every participant watching those videos was an actor that was paid to take part in the study, and no data has been released from the trials thus far, according to a Science Mag interview with Barrett. In other words, this surveillance-y sleep study was a marketing ploy, and every one of these researchers fell for it.
Wow.
Paid actors? No data available? Not meeting the basic standards of decent science? And now me doing a promo for the company that doesn't respect the basic standards of science? What's going on? To summarize, no, ads in dreams are not a thing. Might they be someday? Sure, if someone is willing and tech has advanced dramatically. Let's check back in 10 to 20 years.
All right, so I got an idea. Amazon, you can take this one. You can have it for free. Amazon's got their devices. I got a Fire Stick. It has the microphone option, so you can talk to it. Alexa, find me a show with Baby Shark or whatever. They could probably use data to tell, when people fall asleep during certain shows. They could probably use the microphone to tell if someone's snoring during the show, or maybe if someone's likely to be sleeping. And then they could, pipe in subliminal, here's an ad made for you while you sleep.
Perhaps. Yes. So if one wants to go futuristic, sure. You could imagine your Internet of Things, your smart bed, your smart home, your smart pillow.
Yes.
Oh, it knows you're sleeping. It knows when you're awake. It's like Santa Claus.
Yes.
It knows
your phone, which you literally tell it I'm sleeping now.
Of course.
Yep.
Well, you could, but yes, it would just detect from different waves that it's picking up or the position of your body and restlessness and so on. And then more research would be done at which sleep wave cycle you're most responsive to suggestions.
Yeah.
And then you just do that a million billion times, and hopefully you'll get some hits.
That sounds really dystopian. I don't know if it would work. because they've done research on that, right? You can't listen to a tape and like quit smoking because
No, that's the other thing. I mean, there are overt conscious ads that don't work on people. So yes, you can say, well, because unconscious is different. You're like, well, it's kind of hard to change human behavior.
Yes.
Until next time, think better, act better.
For show notes or to discuss this episode, visit our Facebook page and website at trcpodcast.com. For general inquiries or to send a topic or parody suggestion, email info@trcpodcast.com. Help support the show by leaving a review on iTunes and liking us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter at @TRC_podcast.